we're going to thank our sponsors. Of course, we could not be doing this today without our amazing sponsors. So our Summit Gold sponsors, and hold your applause, please, is our Light Switch and Welltopia.
Silver sponsors, 11th Hour, Moog, Strong MDI Screens, and Xiaoye.
And our Summit Bronze sponsors, the OTB Company and official projection partner, Christie. And thank you, especially Christie. Now, real quickly, while we're getting ready, and if our next presentation team can start making their way to the stage, we're very honored to have some of our past Buzz Prize Lifetime Award recipients in the audience. If you would please stand. I know Jeremy is here somewhere. Jeremy Railton. There's Jeremy Railton.
There's Keith James. There's Jeremy.
And Jeremy. And Keith James in the back. Thank you, Keith. And am I missing any others? All right. And also in the audience, I believe we have some of the past presidents of the Themed Entertainment Association. Keith James, I know, once again. And who else do we have in the audience, past president? And our current president, oh, there's Steve Burkett. Stand up, Steve. Don't be shy.
And there's Roberta. Roberta is a past president.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so we are now ready for our next presentation. Pat, take it
Okay. From that little berry farm a couple miles up the freeway comes the award for AOA, Connected Immersion Theater on a Limited Budget. It's Ghost Town Alive, Knott's Berry Farm, Buena Park, California. Simple innovations take a giant leap forward at Knott's Ghost Town Alive. This immersive Wild West entertainment experience at Knott's Berry engages thousands of guests per day in an interactive role-playing attraction, driving repeat visits and incremental value for the park. Ghost Town encourages guests to become part of a multi-threaded story taking place in real time, joining costumed actors as they unfold the tale of the town of Calico. Guests play alongside bandits, cowboys, horses, musicians, and the town mayor to unlock adventures in Ghost Town Alive. It's designed for families to work together and to become stars in the interactive theatrical production. Please join me in welcoming from Cedar Fair Entertainment, Ken Parks, VP of Entertainment, and Eric Nix, producer.
Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here today, and it's special for us to be able to stand before you today and talk about something that we are very passionate about and very proud of. So to talk about Ghost Town Alive, we really need to look at the story of how Ghost Town came to be and even the origins of Knott's Berry Farm and all of its original intent. So it's a simple story. It's a story of a simple farmer who had a small family that he moved around California trying to find a place where he could find soil that he could grow crops and to call his own. He eventually settled in Buena Park, California, and he really was the embodiment of the American dream. He became friends with a botanist who had recently created and kind of given up on a new hybrid berry. The botanist's name was Rudolph Boysen, and so Walter Knott named the berry the boysenberry. And interestingly enough, you may have had some boysenberry jam this morning, every boysenberry in the world can now be traced back to Walter Knott's farm. So it's also the story of a wife, a farmer's wife, who during the Great Depression was looking for ways to help the family make ends meet. And so she decided to sell chicken out of the back of the family home on her wedding china. And soon word spread about how great the quality of these offerings were at this little roadside attraction. And the family expanded their berry place, where they sold all of the fresh berries and fresh product from the farm, and they created the Chicken Dinner Restaurant. And it was such a success that Walter wanted to give guests something to do as they were waiting for a table, sometimes, as you can see here, in excess of 4 hours. So Walter had a passion for the Old West, and that led him to start working with an artist by the name of Paul von Kleben, and together they designed and built a themed environment for the guests to roam through while they waited for their tables called Ghost Town. So Ghost Town was originally built out of necessity, but it was Walter also inhabited this ghost town. He wanted it to be as authentic as possible, so he inhabited it with colorful Western characters that the guests could interact with, and that the guests could learn stories of the Old West from. The performers lived on the farm free of charge and were actually fed from the chicken dinner restaurant. We wish that were the case today, but that can't happen due to labor laws. But that's all right. And then several buildings that Walter created had what he would call peek-ins. So they were, if you went to the assay office or the sheriff's office, you could actually peek into the windows and you would see a diorama or a scene of a typical day in the life in a Western town.
So fast forward 75 years later, the park wants to honor the heritage of Ghost Town. However, Westerns have sort of fallen out of favor, and Ghost Town sort of just turned into a thoroughfare to get to other attractions. So faced with the same problems that Walter Knott faced 75 years ago, how do we get them to stay? We wanted to celebrate the past without just recreating it, and also meet the needs of today's audience. So we knew we wanted to lovingly restore many of the ghost town facades and buildings that have fallen in disrepair, and give the chicken dinner restaurant a huge makeover, but we needed to do more. So we collaborated with all the divisions in Knott's Berry Farm, and the entertainment design team proposed the idea and creation of a guest interactive and day-long narrative called Ghost Town Alive. And here's a little video.
Thank you. So faced with trying to create Ghost Town Alive and what we needed to do to honor Walter Knott's heritage and the 75th anniversary of Ghost Town, we had to look at where do we start. So we began by taking account of all of the assets that we did have at Knott's. We knew that we had several things that were uniquely tied to Knott's Berry Farm. The first being these wonderful, authentic buildings that created this realistic and authentic setting for us that we could use and could actually fill our characters or give them a space to play in. And a lot of these buildings were actually transported piece by piece originally from real ghost towns in Arizona and throughout the area. Plus, we had these wonderful immersive themed attractions, the first of their kind, that were created by Bud Hurlbut. So we had the Timber Mountain Log Ride that we could include in our story, the Calico Mine Ride, as well as we had an authentic steam locomotive that we could use as a prop, and a horse-drawn stagecoach as well. So we needed to set our goals, and some of the goals that we wanted to keep in mind and we wanted to achieve, we wanted the guests to be able to play along in a day-long narrative that was easy to jump into no matter when you showed up or when you started your visit at the park. And we wanted to keep the guests in Ghost Town for extended amount of times. We wanted to solve the problem of having it no longer be a thoroughfare, but actually become a place that guests would stay for a long amount of time. We also wanted to make Ghost Town a destination again. So we wanted to make it, once again, an attraction and the reason to come to Knott's Berry Farm. And then, since we had these authentic buildings, we wanted to make Calico a living, breathing town that offers guests full immersion and then high repeatability. We decided we would try and do that through designing activities and interactions that would captivate guests and would encourage them to play at their comfort level. So if you wanted to play, that was fantastic. If you didn't and you just wanted to watch, that was okay too. And then we let the guest presence and their actions in Calico make a difference. The other thing that since we had all of these authentic pieces that we could, at our disposal, we didn't want to lean into blatant technology. So we knew that we didn't want to use an app. We didn't want to gamify the experience. We didn't want to have your cell phones be a part of the experience. We really wanted to make the experience about people connecting with other people. So everything was unlocked by really connecting with our characters. And then for the first time ever, for anyone who grew up in SoCal or had nostalgia about the Pekins and about Ghost Town, for the first time in the history of Knott's Berry Farm, we wanted to allow the guests to actually walk into those Pekins. So, you know, it's those rooms that they looked in as kids for years, wondering what it would be like to get into those buildings. We gave them finally the opportunity to do that and to meet the characters that inhabited those buildings.
So to accomplish our goals, we implemented several different techniques. Unlike any other theme park offerings, we chose not to make any promises. No list of activities were given to guests, no show guides. The guests were required to interact with our characters to unlock activities. We did have a hidden timeline that we all knew, but we did not share it with anybody. It had all the story beats and when they would happen, but we didn't want anybody else to know that except for us. This allows the story to feel like it's organically unfolding in front of you and allows our actors to know where we're at any point of the day. Just by glancing at their watch, they know exactly what story beat they're on. This is a glance at what that hidden timeline actually looks like. This allows our actors the opportunity to foreshadow upcoming events or comment on action that has already happened during the day, all in an effort to pull in guests into the story and into the narrative.
So our plot is always fairly simple. It features a lot of classic Western tropes, bank robberies, outlaws, forming posses, etc. And with every season, we bring a continuing but a completely new narrative to the piece. So for example, as a simple narrative for season 1, it was the story of the Mayfield gang coming into town, to the town of Calico to claim it as their own. And then season 2 brought the return of the Mayfield patriarch, Ox Mayfield, that we had heard about in season 1. He came into town, disrupting the town and fighting for the deed. All of this ended this last season in the discovery of a large gold nugget in the Calico mine and started a gold rush in Calico, leading us into the upcoming season 3, which begins on Memorial Day this year.
So how do we do it operationally? We actually have 35 cast members, 27 of which are scheduled every day in Ghost Town, 3 musicians, 2 horses, and a donkey.
That's right. They're important, yeah. So we also knew that we were going to have, as we created an attraction in Ghost Town and interest in Ghost Town, once again, we were going to be dealing with capacity issues. So we had to think that through in the design. In a theme park, you know, you're always dealing with thousands of guests who all want that same experience. The good news was we hadn't promised them anything, so they didn't quite know what they wanted. However, we were happy to show them. And so what we did is we took 3 major areas of Ghost Town, which is quite a bit of real estate for us. We had Main Street, and then we had Calico Park, and then also Schoolhouse Road that we could use. And we wanted, of course, not just to create action in one of those locations at a time. We wanted it constantly to be active. So one of the things that we did is in several of the buildings, we created similar experiences so that the guests wouldn't feel left out, that they didn't get to send a telegram or find clues or do some mission work. And although they had a similar sort of setup, they had vastly different endings. And then another storytelling technique that we used was we wanted to move our guests through the town. So we wanted the story to move through the town as it realistically would, with the hope of also picking up new guests as we went along. So this allowed us to kind of redistribute guests through the flow of our actions. And you know, an example is a story beat might have started in Calico Square, and then it would actually transport the guests then to another area of Calico, all the time picking up guests, so that you might start with a small gathering of 30, but by the time you got to 3 different locations, you were now looking at 300 people gathered around. An example of that was in the 2nd season, Ox Mayfield had been wanted and he arrived on our steam train, and so a posse was formed down on Main Street with the guests to go and collect him. They went down to Calico Park, they collected Ox, and since he was forced to stand trial, the scene then started moving as it would down to Town Hall where he stood trial, and then once he was found guilty and convicted, he was then transported down to Main Street where the guests saw him being locked up into the jail. This allowed us to, once again, pick up lots of newcomers, and the story beats all then had a kind of a simple callback. So if you'd missed one story beat, there was a callback to let you know what was happening in the story, so that it was easy to pick up on what was going on.
So you might wonder, how do we keep guests up to date when they haven't been playing since park opening? We actually had a series of pre-printed newspapers that were released after key moments during the day. This allowed guests the opportunity to get caught up on the day's events. Another entry to our story was actually to let guests become news reporters for us and report on the day's events and come back to the Postman and the Gazette and let them know what was happening. This is truly our only use of technology from a backstage perspective. The magic of a pre-printed newspaper with easily adjustable word templates allowed us the ability to feature the guests in a very tangible way, and lots of folks walked away with those newspapers with their name printed in that newspaper, and I'm sure those are on some walls somewhere in folks' houses.
Sure. The other thing is the tools that we use, so we equip our performers with a variety of activities and designed interactions. There are literally hundreds of those that they can be pulled out of their so-called utility belt at any moment. Interactions that fit whatever specific opportunity that they might encounter with a guest. And all of the intention of this is just to draw guests deeper and further into the story. So we're going to kind of go through a couple of examples of what those would be. So at the assay office, it's sort of the starting point for several activities, but it was the starting point of a map quest that happened where there was a gold nugget that could be found. And so the guests would go and collect throughout a town several pieces of this map that ultimately led them to board the Calico Mine Ride, where they discovered the infamous nugget. And the guests playing the narrative, the nice thing about this is the guests that were playing the narrative, they saw the nugget in the attraction now to have added value because they had discovered it through their actions. But guests not playing the narrative just saw the guests as an added element of decor to the immersive attraction.
Next up, over at the Barbershop, since we really can't cut the hair or shave the faces of our guests, our town barber encourages guests to select a style of mustache from his chart. You could get a pencil-thin mustache to play a bandit, a handlebar mustache to be a well-to-do person of town, a bushy mustache as a lawman, or a walrus mustache as a townsfolk or miner. Our actors are aware of the different styles of those mustaches and the type of citizen they represent. So they know exactly how to react and treat those guests when they encounter them, those newly mustachioed and character-endowed guests.
So our gunsmith character at our shooting gallery, which is a coin-op shooting gallery in the park, but our gunsmith character actually carries 2 wireless guns that at any point can activate targets within the gallery. So guests can now help characters within our town settle their disputes by having a shooting contest that happens at the shooting gallery.
Over at the post office, oh, I'm sorry.
That's me, yeah. Then at the post office, each character has several pre-written pieces of mail and telegrams that allow the guests insight into their backstory and the overall town narrative. And the guests can retrieve and deliver those pre-written letters or correspondences and packages by helping out the postman, and then also helping out story beats that are happening throughout the day.
Over at the barn, you can interact, feed, and help groom our live horses, visit with the prospector and his donkey. And the addition of the animals really sort of lended to the authenticity of the environment itself and really made it feel like the town came alive.
Then over at the bank, this was sort of a central location for criminal activity. This was robbed several times a day by several people. You know, our fear was always that we would be, you know, in the end that parents would say, great, you taught my kid how to rob a bank and then how to gamble and fire a gun. None of that happened, but that's good. Anyway, it also, so guests could help stop the robbery or help their particular gang in a heist, and then could also help the banker find a lost combination to open the safe and see what was inside of the safe.
Over at the saloon, we actually taught children a dance number and then highlighted them during a segment in the daily Can-Can show. This is an example of how we integrated our normal operating shows, like the saloon show or the Wild West Stunt show, and helped fold that narrative into the overall experience.
And then the culmination of the day happens in Calico Park, and it's a hoedown where a live band and all of the characters that you've met throughout the day come together to celebrate our Founders Day. And this allows the guests one last opportunity for interaction, but it also allows them to interact with characters that they've created connections with throughout the entire day. And then lastly, for a typical day guest, you know, a single day's interaction with our narrative would be compelling and exciting, but we also have to design for our annual pass holders in mind, folks who come every day throughout the season. And so throughout the season, what we do is we actually entice those pass holders with what we call tin cans. Basically, we kind of stir the pot a little bit and we throw in some additional story threads that get them, that actually put a little more energy and life and kind of spark them to continue to be active in the town.
So part of the fun of the storyline is dealing with the everyday operation of the park. For instance, our infamous misfit animal, the catawampus, needed to be pulled from the park for a bit of maintenance. A loving staple of the park, missing for any amount of time, our devout guests would sort of freak out. And however, the story equipped our performers, or we created a story that equipped our performers with the answers on why the curious animal went missing. While we lovingly restored the creature, we created a companion animal, Kittywampus, a smaller version of the catawampus, which would be moved around Calico and ultimately became a scavenger hunt for our guests. They reveled in the fact each day of being the first to spot Kittywampus and report back to our townsfolk on social media and help everyone stay up to date on the migration patterns of the catawampus. So ultimately, we were able to justify the maintenance of a Knott staple by wrapping a simple story around it.
So ultimately, we found success through personal interactions. The Guest Town became an attraction once again, with the average guest spending up to 5 hours per day with our narrative. Food and beverage and merchandise also saw increased sales in the immediate area. And then our repeat visitors kind of clamor and actually buy. We saw an increase in season passes because of this event, that they look forward to finding out what happens in the next story. The other thing that happened that's kind of interesting is that the wait times in the rest of the park began to decrease because people were spending so much time in Ghost Town. We thank you very much for listening.
Are you guys ready for Q&A? Ready for Q&A?
Sure.
Great.
You want to sit?
Yeah.
All right, it's time for Q&A. Come on, all you people who are great fans. I see a hand over here. There you go. Good. Next up.
I have a question over here to your left. Hi.
Maybe.
Hey. How the hell did you sell this?
Yeah, that's what our marketing team said, right? How do you sell something that we can't promise anybody?
How did you sell it to your bosses? How did you get through the meeting where you said, we want to hire 35 people and put them on the street and we're not going to charge anything for it?
We were very lucky. We had a general manager at the time by the name of Rafi Caprillion, who had an experience out with the blacksmith. We have a working blacksmith shop, and he actually watched the guests interacting with this blacksmith and thought, oh my gosh, this is what we should do throughout the entire town. So he was the person that was behind it. The amazing part of it was he was so behind it. It's very seldom do you find people, especially on an executive level, that would believe in something that is fairly unbelievable. So I think he was very good to us, because at times when I knew he didn't quite believe it, he never showed us that he didn't believe it. He was in it to win it. Luckily, it paid off for him. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I was just wondering what the rehearsal time was like. Adam Sharp, theater and film, but I was wondering how you incorporated rehearsal time after you cast all the actors, how you knew who you wanted to cast, how many you're going to repeat, all of those things, and if the people weren't available in the next year for the next season, for example.
Yeah, the rehearsal process is about a 5-week intensive rehearsal process. So we really knew that to do this right, we had to spend the time and the money to do it, and to take the time that it takes to put together. We have several of those things that happen. Most of it, since it's connected to play, we teach a lot of different techniques in how to make this happen. One of the things that we found was that actors were not always the best at this. It was really folks who had a guest guest service training and guest service models because they could take their ego out of the equation and just make it all about serving the guest, right? And since the guest is really sort of the person that we want to feel like they're a part of that town, they were able to easily do that. Then another way that we found that you, almost like the Cattywampus or some of the other things that we've done, if the story is solid enough, you can simply justify anything in the story, and the guests, if they're in the mix and really into it, will accept it. So we had a great example was we had Ox Mayfield at the end of the first season appear in the train. We had this cliffhanger moment that happened on the last day of the event, and it was a big dramatic moment, and we had an actor that we had hired just to play Ox Mayfield, who then later told us as we were getting ready for season 2, I'm not available. So we had, we encountered now, everyone has seen Ox Mayfield, he lives forever on YouTube. How do we do this? So we actually hired an actor that was thinner and a little more gaunt, and we basically justified it by saying that because Ox had spent years out in the Western territories evading the law in the last couple of months, he actually now looked like a completely different person. And the and the guests accepted it, right? And now they love Ox Mayfield, and we've never heard about the former actor who showed up as Ox Mayfield one time. So anyway, thank you for the question.
There's a question in the back here.
Hey, Michael Mulligan, Storyland Studios over here, proud pass holder over at Knott's Berry Farm. Thank you guys so much for doing this presentation this morning. Love going to Ghost Town Alive. If you guys haven't done it, come back and go see it. I don't work for Knott's, but go see it, it's amazing. One of the things that I did notice, though, about guest interaction, which is why we all love what we do, is the amount of special needs guests that were able to interact with the talent and with the story, and it didn't matter about wait times, it didn't matter about anything else. So going forward, do you think that this is more of a model for other themed entertainment and everybody else to be able to tell a story this way, or it doesn't necessarily impact the family in time sensitivity or special needs or anything else? Just curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope. One of the things that is so nice, in our past lives and other projects that we worked on, we were always chasing this through technology, and we were always finding magic through technology. And the thing that is so amazing about this is that, once again, it's donkeys and horses and people, and that's pure magic. We just anecdotally, we had several guests who had children who experienced Ghost Town Alive who were on the autism spectrum, and we started unlocking kids that way, which was really amazing. We still have parents who come back and thank us for one child in particular was at the beginning of the summer would not speak to anyone, and by the end of the summer was conversing with our characters in full sentences. So that's a kind of a nice, that's awesome. And then we are currently working with a group that's going to help us learn even more so that we can have more techniques to give to our actors so that they can deal with all of our guests, right? That they have a way to communicate and connect with all of our guests. So thank you for the question.
Do we have another? Here.
Sure.
In this
Hi, Jan Lower from Elbow Productions, UK. Sorry, the other way.
Sorry.
Yeah. It sounds absolutely amazing. I was just wondering if there's a point of critical mass when you get if you get a rush of people in, at what point do those 27 performers, does it start to become really a pinch point? Have you got a ratio of sort of, like, actually, if we get 500 people arrive at once, this becomes a problem?
Yeah, the nice thing about it is that, by adding the story beats, this timeline, this narrative that just sort of organically unfolds in front of you, if our characters are getting sort of overwhelmed with interactivity, they can foreshadow those events and guide people without saying something as simple as, there'll be a bank robbery at 2 o'clock. But they can use a way to bend to get those folks, or extra audience members to those locations. And so those guests get involved that way. So the nice part of it is that we've not reached critical mass yet. Well, but the good news is that we have a couple of different things that are going on to kind of combat that. We have the one-on-one interactions and then also these story beats that just kind of appear or seem to magically appear.
Center house.
You've been waiting. Thank you for your.
I was told to stand and draw attention to myself.
It's much easier.
Yes. So I think you guys have built a lot of flexibility into this, which I think is really amazing and admirable. But I'm wondering, did you have to do any more extensive world building with your actors and other members of the team in order to be able to improvise or be flexible in kind of little moments with guests to hold the integrity of the story?
Yeah, we do. That's why I think in the 5-week rehearsal process is so necessary. We do quite a bit of improv techniques. One of the things that we do that really helps is we do throughout the process once we've sort of worked on their characters and who they are within that town. And we develop that with the actors. So we have who those characters are, but we are very flexible to allow them to help us create that so that for the actor, it feels like wearing a suit, right? They don't have to overthink what a director has told them to be. They really authentically feel like they are that character. But one of the things that we do is a simple a town hall meeting, and we bring up a topic that we know a guest could possibly bring into to the play at some point, and then the actors improvise as their characters in this town hall meeting. So they all now, by this exercise, know what the backstory is at any given moment. If a guest asks them about, a situation that might have happened in the town's past, they all know it because they lived it, they talked about it, and they created it together. So, yeah.
We have time for one more quick question because I see you standing.
Hi, my name is Zoe Fizor with Thinkwell Group. I actually just bought a pass to Knott's Berry Farm to go for the first time tomorrow, so I'm very excited.
Great,
But my question is, from an operations perspective, on the back end, are there stage managers or some kind of system that help to guide the performers and kind of manage things as they come up during the day?
Yeah, so we have several stage managers who are also in costume and in character, so the guests have no clue that they're actually operations folks who are actually guiding some of these moments and making sure that they happen and go as scheduled. And then we have quite a few prop folks as well that are backstage constantly supplying. If you look at where we talked about the post office where there's all of this mail. If a guest goes into the post office and they want to retrieve the mail for Miss Violet, they can find Miss Violet's post box and take it out. We have prop folks that are constantly replacing those things so that the box is never empty. So it always appears as if any activity is always ready to go. So yeah, it's quite a. But the nice thing for us is we try to keep it hidden from the guests and unseen from the guests, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah.
let's thank Ken and Eric. And go to Knott's!
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.